Why hello YouTube, greetings from the Lazy Eyebrow to review a figure from the third wave of Kingdom. This is the stop motion review for Kingdom Trax. And before you run to the comments about the hood, it's been modified already. Trax comes with the plain red flame as seen here and on the box. This is in reference to all the times the animators didn't have the time to draw a 3-tier flamed hood on every frame of the G1 show and took the shortcut of drawing a single red flame to get the point across. But hey, it's 2021 and the worse we can make our figures look in the name of on-screen accuracy the better, right? Well, I said nuts to that, removed it with rubbing alcohol and put a water slide on for the proper flame decal. If you're also wanting this look, I'm sure Toy Hacks will be on it sooner rather than later. As for the rest of how Trax comes, at first glance he's pretty good. I'm rather fond of the color. It's a bright, saturated shade of blue that looks really good. Given how much of it is painted blue versus molded blue, it surprisingly matches each other really well. Like, my camera tends to amplify any color inconsistencies, so the fact that even under these light conditions and camera settings it all looks uniform in color, that's a full-blown achievement. You gotta give credit for that. As for the shape of the car, it also looks pretty good. It's got the basic shapes of the late 70s variant of the Corvette C3 while changing it enough to avoid a lawsuit. One point I especially like is that the robot shin panels that are this long out of necessity for the sake of robot mode have a design in them to make it look like a front body kit that was an option for this model of car. Like, if your robot parts are so big they don't fit within the vehicle mode, then modifying them to look like more vehicle mode, that's pretty clever. So that's about where my praise for this ends. It's a nice blue that somehow, despite all reason, pulls off a uniform color front to back between the molding and the paint. And it's a non-infringing take of the C3 that, at a quick look, says, yep, that's Trax. Now for what's wrong. I'm absolutely flummoxed how this design made it out of the concept phase. Like, let's work front to back. This connection system is garbage. Like, if you look at the front, you can see just how bad the gaps between the fender and the hood are. The main fix for this involves a pair of pliers to finish the job of assembly. That's a widespread QC issue, and an argument can be made that has nothing to do with how it was designed, and fair enough. The design issue, though, is right here. You see this little tiny, insignificant 2mm nub? Yeah, that's the only thing holding your fender in place. What's even more stupid is there's a rectangular port here for robot mode. So it's not like that couldn't have been taken advantage of for the sake of a more solid connection point, but this nub should hold her. Second issue, I mentioned that some of the blue is painted, but what I really meant by that is most of the car is painted. This entire section of the car is made up of our favorite material, clear plastic. That's right, at least 60% of the car is just clear plastic. Shout out to all you owners of this figure in 2025 who haven't had theirs crack or crumble in some way. Speaking of paint, these flight mode fins just sort of clip onto these bars in the clear plastic, and unlike the masterpiece are left unpainted. So you get this garish white just hanging out at the back of the car, which that in and of itself is just ugly. Like, let's table the white fin discussion for a second. We've got unpainted taillights, which themselves are just an aesthetic nightmare. Like, this is just... what even is this taillight? It feels like at one point they were molding Corvette taillights back here, and then the higher up said to change it and forgot to update the tail fin molding in the process, and the end result being this random collection of primitives. Like, without the color mismatch, this is the shape they gave us for a taillight. Like, what is this? And then it's unpainted on top of that? Just, ugh. I'm not saying we need the classic 4-circle taillight array from the licensed C3. It'd be nice, obviously, but I get it. It's not licensed, and we all know Chevrolet hates their branding on Transformers. But can't we at least get it painted at the very least, or better yet, designed so it looks good or something? Like, this is Trax, man. I know I talk about the back of cars as much as Jobby talks about the back of robots, but this isn't just any car mode. This is a character who, if you know one thing about Trax, it's his obsession with his
stunning auto mode.
And we're given this. A car mode that looks like garbage at the back and won't lock together at the front unless you finish their job. Like, come on. Anyway, let's take a look at the flight mode. This is accomplished by pulling the arms down, then out, rotating the wings out, rotating the arms 180 degrees, flipping the fins out, and finally popping in the accessories. And flight mode. At first glance, it's a decent flight mode. Like, it definitely looks a lot better than the Reveal the Shield attempt from a decade ago, whether that's in the official capacity or the fan mode from Camzilla 51. But again, just looks better, as neither the arms nor the wings have any sort of locking point or anything, so they're free to just roam and twist about wildly. Second, and probably most importantly, there's nothing to peg the flight mode into. Like, if you look at the bottom of certain other figures, you can see the 3mm ports that they started including in figures these days are fully accessible. Of course, not all figures have access to this in their vehicle mode. More often than not, it feels like a happy accident. However, this is something that Trax could have actually benefited from, but for some reason, they overlooked this in the design. And it's not like he doesn't even have this port. Here it is in the back of his robot mode. But when you look at the underside of the vehicle, you'll see that absolutely no ports whatsoever have been designed into the bottom. No 3mm, no 5mm, nothing is here to plug any sort of flight stand into. Which means that while Gigawatt can display the hovercar conversion of 2015, you're basically just left a swoosh Trax around with your hand, as that's the best you're going to get. However, like the car mode, it's not all bad. The molded intake vents are pretty cool. The wings look pretty good. The fins that ruin the automotive aesthetic look fairly decent in flight mode. And at the end of the day, this is about the second best Trax flight mode that's ever come out of Hashtag since the 80s, being superseded by the Masterpiece, of course. But once you stop looking at just aesthetics and take into account the design of it all, or more accurately, the lack thereof, it winds up feeling almost like an unofficial fan mode, the way it all just sort of sits there. Like, that's honestly the vibe I get from it all. For those about to point out that the G1 toy was like this back in the day with the arms just hanging out at the side all loosey-goosey, that same toy didn't have leg articulation, and I don't see us emulating that limitation. Why do we need to emulate this? So let's jump back into car mode for a sec for some size comparisons. Here he is with Earthrise Cliffjumper, Netflix Bumblebee, customized Kingdom Red Alert, and customized Kingdom Wheeljack. As weird as it sounds, it actually sort of scales best with Cliffjumper and Bumblebee, and to some extent the Datsun Quartet. All the other carbots that aren't in the minibots category are all way bigger in vehicle mode, and then there's Trax, who is one of the few that can actually fit into Prime's trailer like Prowl, Cliff, and Bee do. Even compared to their scaled models, they actually scale up pretty well. Not perfectly, of course, but a lot closer than any of the other War for Cybertron vehicles do. And for some fun, some other Chevrolet products that are actually licensed. So that's Kingdom Trax in his vehicle mode. And I don't know if you can tell, but I'm not super fond of it. It looks fine. It even has some neat references to Corvettes of the era, but even that doesn't save it from the nonsense of the unfinished factory build, and especially not the mess that is the back of the car. To reiterate, Trax is a character that prioritizes his vehicle, and for this character to have an auto mode that is anything less than stunning, I honestly feel that really does the character dirty. Anyway, let's dive into transformation right after we take a quick break.
The Transformers will return after these messages. We now return to the Transformers.
Righto then, transformation. First things first, pull the arms out and to the side like the flight mode. Next, you'll need to get all the clear plastic separated from the bot. And if you notice these plastic tabs here, I very much recommend filing, sanding, grinding, or otherwise removing them somehow, because once they're in, they're in. And unlocking this takes a good amount of bending and force that would make me feel leery on regular plastic, let alone the fact of doing this with clear plastic. Anyway, yeah, get the bulk of the car out of the way so we can have room to make this into a backpack. To do that, simply flex the roof and side windows so that you can take the windshield and fold it inside the back of the car. Back on the front, rotate the fenders down with the feet navigating itself around the bottom of the car. Fold these panels down, extend the legs and the fenders, both of which are on their tree-like armatures. Then close up the leg panels again. Rotate the fenders the rest of the way forward at this point, then take special note. You see this ridiculous excuse of a peg? The one that just barely juts itself out and could easily be mistaken as just part of the detailing on the shin? Yeah, that is supposed to peg into the rectangular port I mentioned earlier on the fender. Emphasis on supposed to, in the sense that it really doesn't. Your entire figure is now depending on this terrible connection at the knee. Good luck. As for the rest of the transformation, slide the fake roof up, then lock it into the tab on the waist. Move the wings on the side up while the arms go down, then rotate it 180 degrees like in the flight mode. Rotate the hands out, rotate the car shell around at the top, then fold it down so it pegs into the back. Then finally rotate the waist 180 degrees, and you're done. Kingdom Trax at first glance looks fantastic. As such, he makes a great shelf figure. Like one look and there's no mistaking who this is. This looks exactly like G1 Trax should look in his robot mode, and the fact this happens at a deluxe price point is pretty stellar too. It looks like the Masterpiece, but at a deluxe price point. That's pretty awesome. So first things first, this is how he comes out of the box. Like I mentioned before, the wings are pretty blank, thus my red vinyl. But the product code, seeing as how they couldn't find anywhere else to put it, was tampographed on the front of the right leg. Under normal circumstances, a bit of rubbing alcohol and a Q-tip, it would come right off. But through some galaxy brain move, they decided that this specific piece needed cast in black, then painted gray. So by removing the product code, I've been left with a black smear. Credit where credit is due, the color matching is so close I genuinely thought this part was molded like the thighs above it. However, this doesn't change the fact that they tampographed an unsightly product code on painted plastic, and your options are ruined paint or random letters on his right leg. The other thing that absolutely drives me insane is the chest window is fake. This isn't the first time Trax has resorted to this, mind you. The alternators comes to mind. However, in this case, I feel it's totally uncalled for. Like, the roof is already back there, and it's not like it juts out too far, so it's not like it couldn't have been used. Mech Fans Toys at Legends scale understands this and elected to use existing parts to make the robot proportions what they were supposed to be instead of making 60% of a car turn into a shell-forming backpack. But if you're also the person that believes Trax needs to be super slender and the genuine part couldn't have pulled that off, well, even then, it's not like the solution hasn't been discovered. And no, I'm not even talking about what a third party has done. I'm talking about figures currently in print from Hasbro. Like Wheeljack and the extensive retool Sunstreaker use a system of taking only a portion of the roof and windshield to get the shape they want, while also staving off from using fake parts, and it ends up being a solution to the animated proportional problem that I totally respect. Something like that could have happened here, but no, we need to resort to fake parts yet again. That being said though, I personally am in the camp that using the whole roof doesn't look that bad. Exhibit A being the Mech Fans Toys Legends version of this character, and Exhibit B being the reveal the shield take. When this released, I thought it looked good, and at the time, that also seemed to be the general consensus, even despite some of its other flaws. None of those flaws, by the way, were ever about the legs, mind you, an area in which Kingdom Trax literally falls flat. First off, the gap between the feet and the legs looks super weird. From most viewable angles, Trax looks super gappy and it's kind of unsightly. Second, the tops of the legs are open so you can see the spindly mess of armatures contained therein. It's not exactly pleasant to look at, and aesthetics aside, this terrible design has brought this video to a grinding halt. Normally at this time, I would be covering articulation. However, I literally can't move the robot without that useless excuse they call to peg on those paint-corrected shins coming untapped from those lanky front fenders and the whole thing toppling over. Every time I would try to animate any sort of robot movement, I would get one frame in, go to move something, and the thing would fall apart at the knees. These diet reviews I try and keep short by not covering accessories or heavy modifications, but without a print or a heavy fix, I literally cannot complete this video. And that's why the first half of this script was written before I had finished filming the last half, as I'm currently waiting for my printer to finish up before I can continue filming it. And there we go. These are leg plates designed by Robot78, so if you want to print your own, there's a link below. If you don't have a printer, JRC Design also sells the physical part. Again, link below. Shout out to Bolt Matrix for covering these, otherwise I would have totally missed this. Anyway, these work by opening up the leg, slotting this over the knee joint, closing the shin, and sticking the new peg into the wheel well. This is such a clever design. It's really elegant. It's structurally sound and makes the figure actually function, and as an added bonus, it also covers up the tops of the leg, making it look like one solid piece, which is also nice. It's just a shame that these are more or less mandatory figure that keeps getting its size class price increased. But hey, at least after spending $2 on the file and then printing it, my Trax figure that I just dropped 40 Canadian dollars on works as intended now, so that's pretty wizard. Mind you, if you want a free fix that doesn't involve having extra parts, a few videos exist that involve a pair of pliers and clamping down on this pin to tighten up the tolerance of the fender. I'll probably do this at some point, I don't know. Anyway, with that spiel out of the way and parts ready to go, let's film the rest of this video. Articulation. Head is on a ball joint, but the molding doesn't allow it to move much without parts colliding. Shoulders rotate 360 degrees. Mind you, the wings are permanently fixed to them, so they move with those shoulders. They also have outward movement, bicep swivel, 90-degree elbow movement, and no wrist rotation. Waist rotates 360 degrees. Hip flap moves out of the way to allow for full forward movement, and provided the real roof of the car wasn't there, they'd probably go all the way backward too. However, they also go all the way out as well. Thigh rotation, knees bend 90 degrees with or without the 3D printed parts, and finally, ball jointed feet for all sorts of range if it wasn't all loosey-goosey. All things considered, the range is somehow better than the masterpiece version from 5 years ago. It's just a shame that all the joint tolerances are so loose that moving one joint will cause 3 others to move along with it, except the elbow. That thing is tight no matter what you do with anything else. As for his accessories, he comes with a double missile barrel I pointed out in flight mode. This pops in the 5mm port that's pulling double duty as the pin that holds the bulk of the car to the robot. And second, he gets his blaster. As far as blasters go, it's certainly a blaster. As for size comparison, Kingdom Sideswipe, Alternate Reality Kingdom Sideswipe, Unique Toy Sound Mixer, Kingdom Inferno, Siege Ironhide, Kingdom Optimus, Earthrise Cliff Jumper, Earthrise Thrust, Combiner Wars Blades, Combiner Wars Windcharger, Studio Series Shatter, Studio Series Mirage, and Combiner Wars Power Glide. Red Bots aside, here's the rest of his Season 2 cast. And man, in this lineup, just standing here, he really shines. I think that's what Kingdom Tracks is honestly best at. Like, if you're just wanting a track strictly for a robot mode display piece that you're going to plunk on a shelf and don't plan on posing too much, this is the perfect fit for you. Because honestly, Jerry puts it best.
He's for display only. You handle him too much, he's not gonna last.
But if you care about playing with it, if you care as much as Track does about his car mode, if you were hoping to have him displayed in flight mode, if you love to animate your robots on camera, if you simply want to play with the toy you bought, I can't recommend this. The car mode won't peg together unless you're brave enough to finish the job of a factory worker. The flight mode has nothing to plug into, and you either have to finish assembly or buy upgrades for an already overpriced figure just to have it stand under its own weight. Which is just such a shame because going off of looks alone, this very well could have been the definitive Tracks, and it's just not. If you already have an RTS Tracks and you're unsure if you should pick up this Tracks, don't bother. The only reason to get this is if you don't have a Tracks yet, or you just want a robot mode that stands on your shelf and does nothing. It's almost impossible to animate or pose without some sort of modification, and there's just so many negatives that outweigh the positives. This has easily been one of the most frustrating War for Cybertron figures of 2021, and me personally, I'm just done. I don't know what I'm going to do with my copy. I might keep it till a better one is made. I might sell it. Heck, I might transform it into flight mode and hook it off a bridge. I don't know. But one thing's for sure is I'm about done with interacting with Tracks this week. This has been the Lazy Eyebrow.